Love, incest, racism, jealousy, revenge. It takes a master's hand to mix all these potent ingredients without getting heavy-handed. A mission accomplished for David Payne, whose novel Back to Juan de Paso establishes him as one of the most accomplished American authors of his generation. Back to Juan de Paso has just been published in France by Belfond, and David Payne, who's passing through Paris, is visiting us here in the France 24 studios. Hello, thank you very much for joining us. So your story navigates between past and present. The past is the Civil War and the story of Ade, a young high society woman from Charleston who marries Harlan, the owner of Juan de Paso. It's a loveless marriage that drives her into the arms of Jerry, Harlan's enslaved stepbrother. And in the present, there's Ran, a fallen rock star who sees his wife drift away from him and grow closer to Marcel, his band's ex-drummer, who is black. In both love triangles, two sides are white, one is black. Why?
Well, I wanted to show the same situation being acted out in two different historical periods, and to ask the question, is this racial love triangle, which ends in murder in the Civil War period, has enough changed to have a different outcome in the present day, or is it going to repeat itself? In other words, are those racial prejudices still alive to the same degree, and will the outcome be the same? And the thing that connects them is this mysterious black pot which Ransom finds buried on the grounds of the plantation Juan de Paso.
And this is the link between present and past.
That's the link between the two times.
But the question of race really comes up throughout the book. At what point Ran asks his wife, when you look in the mirror, can you honestly tell yourself that you, Claire Delay from south of Broad in Charleston, who grew up with a black maid and servants, are 100% politically correct and certified error-free, that there's no lingering trace of racial prejudice in your own heart? What makes you think that racial prejudice is still alive and strong in the U.S.?
I think things have changed outwardly, politically, legally. There's been a tremendous change since the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s. It really started in the 50s. But at another level, there are subtle levels of racism that I wanted to explore in this book that have not changed that dramatically. Addie, the main character in the past story, falls in love with this very sophisticated, very bright, enslaved black man, and yet she treats him in some subtle way differently than she treats his white brother. And she's not even aware of why she does that. And I wanted to explore what it is in her that can't break through to seeing him the same way she sees herself. And so I think in the U.S. we're still struggling with that issue.
And you also bring the question of race through music. At what point Ran insists that rock and roll is a white creation, in contrast to those who think that rock and roll comes from the blues and is therefore a black creation. What do you think about that?
Well, the really interesting thing to me is that I think that the South in the United States is in many ways a Creole culture. What makes the South so different and distinctive is the African influence that came in with the enslaved Africans. So when you look at the blues, when you look at rock and roll, when you look at Faulkner, when you look at Eudora Welty, many of the famous Southern writers, the inflections of their speech, the patterns of language, none of those would be what they are. They would not be distinctive if it weren't for the African influence and inflections that came in. And so, you know, on the one hand, you have this racism that still exists. On the other hand, you have a culture that's Creole, that's merged, that's part black, part white, and sort of inseparable.
So are you optimistic about the future for the U.S., let's say?
I think so. I think that when my children, who are 8 and 6, they're growing up in a world where race really, they don't even really know what it means. And I think by the time they're adults, we'll have passed into a different phase. But we're not there yet. So I'm optimistic.
So thank you very much, David Payne, for having joined us today. Back to One Dog Passo is published in France by Belfond, translated into French by Virginie Bulle. Thank you for joining us, and see you tomorrow for another Culture magazine.